They humiliated her at the harvest dance. Then an Apache man gently took her hand. Emily Carter had never felt truly at home since she and her mother had moved to Red Mesa. The town was small, with dusty streets and wooden houses lined along the main road. Its people were friendly to each other, but often cautious with strangers. For Emily, who had grown up in a larger city, the quiet of Red Mesa was both comforting and lonely. After losing her father in an accident, moving here had seemed like the right choice. Her mother wanted a fresh start, a safe place to live and perhaps to heal from their grief. But for Emily, the move brought a mixture of hope and anxiety. She had left behind friends, a familiar school, and the life she knew. Now, every day felt like walking on a tightrope, careful not to stand out too much, not to make waves, yet secretly wishing someone would notice her for who she was. Autumn had arrived, and with it came the crisp air that made her lungs feel alive every morning. The leaves on the few trees in town had turned golden and red, crunching underfoot when she walked to school. It was this time of year that brought the town together for its most beloved tradition, the annual harvest dance. The harvest dance was held every year at the old town square. People decorated it with strings of lights, colorful ribbons, and pumpkins of all sizes. There was music, dancing, and food, and families from miles around came to join. For Emily, it wasn't just a dance. It was a chance to be part of something bigger than herself, a chance to feel connected, even if only for one night. She had been looking forward to it for weeks, imagining the warmth of the lights, the rhythm of the music, and maybe, just maybe, a friendly smile from someone she had not yet met. In the days leading up to the dance, Emily's mother had spent evenings helping her pick out what to wear. They looked through old dresses, trying to find one that would make Emily feel comfortable yet presentable. They finally settled on a pale blue dress that had belonged to her mother when she was young. It wasn't flashy or expensive, but it carried memories, and Emily liked that. When she tried it on, her mother adjusted the hem, smoothed the wrinkles, and tucked loose strands of hair behind Emily's ears. "You look beautiful," her mother said softly, smiling with pride. Emily felt a spark of hope. Maybe tonight would be different. Maybe tonight she could feel like she belonged, even if only for a few hours. As the sun dipped behind the distant hills, and the sky turned shades of pink and orange, Emily and her mother walked toward the town square. The air was cool, carrying the smell of fallen leaves and the distant scent of roasted corn. The square was alive with movement and color. Children ran past carrying small lanterns that flickered in the evening light. Families chatted as they arranged blankets on the grass, and the local band began to tune their instruments near the stage. The sound of laughter and music was inviting, but it also made Emily nervous. She tried to steady her breathing, reminding herself that she had every right to be there. She had every right to enjoy the night. Yet, the moment she stepped closer to the crowd, a wave of self-consciousness washed over her. Everyone seemed to know each other, and she felt like a visitor in someone else's world. Emily stood near the refreshment table, gripping a paper cup of cider. The warm apple scent made her feel slightly more at ease. She watched the other girls as they moved across the dance floor in sparkling dresses, their hair bouncing with every step. They laughed in groups, whispered to one another, and shared inside jokes that Emily couldn't hear. A pang of longing hit her. She wanted to laugh with them, to feel the simple joy of belonging. But she didn't know how. She felt invisible. Her heart sank, and she hugged the cup closer, telling herself to be brave. Gathering all the courage she had, Emily stepped toward the dance floor. Her steps were hesitant at first, but she tried to sway gently to the music. She imagined herself as part of the celebration, blending in, moving to the rhythm. But then she heard them. Not a shout, not a scream, just a whisper. Yet it was loud enough to cut through her fragile confidence. "Did you see her dress?" one girl whispered. "It looks like something from another decade," another added, trying not to laugh. "Who even invited her?" A third voice chimed in, soft but sharp. Emily froze. Her face felt hot. The music that had once felt like a friendly pulse now seemed cruel and mocking. She tried to keep moving, hoping they would stop, hoping they would realize she wasn't trying to draw attention. But the whispers continued, carried by the gentle breeze, echoing around her ears. A boy nearby snickered and looked away quickly, not wanting to be involved but clearly amused. Emily's hands trembled slightly. She felt her stomach twist with embarrassment. The cider in her cup sloshed against the edges. She clutched it tighter, almost spilling it on herself. A girl deliberately stepped into her path, brushing her shoulder as she passed. "Oh, sorry," the girl said, her voice sweet but false. Emily could see the smirk hidden behind the apology. She knew it wasn't an accident. Her stomach sank further, and she realized that tonight the harvest dance was no longer a place of celebration for her. It had become a place where she felt small, insignificant, and judged. The very thing she had been hoping for, a sense of belonging, seemed further away than ever. Her chest tightened, and tears threatened to spill. She told herself to leave, to escape before it got worse. But at the same time, a stubborn part of her wanted to stay, to prove to herself that she could endure, that she could face the humiliation without breaking entirely. Emily moved toward the edge of the square, avoiding the dance floor. Her steps were careful and measured. She tried to hold her head high, but the weight of eyes and whispers pressed down on her. It was in this moment, just as she was ready to turn away completely, that she noticed someone standing alone near a wooden post. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't whispering. He wasn't part of the group that had made her feel so small. He simply watched. His posture was relaxed, but his gaze was steady, full of quiet concern. There was something in the calmness of his presence that made Emily pause, even though she couldn't yet understand why. Daniel Whitehawk was an Apache man who had lived in the region all his life. He worked with the town's land conservation team, tending to the forests and protected areas nearby. He wasn't known for being flashy or social. He preferred quiet work, listening to the wind through the trees and the songs of birds rather than seeking attention from others. Yet, that evening, he had watched Emily from a distance. He had seen the whispered comments, the deliberate bumping, the subtle cruelty that some people thought was harmless. He had witnessed the weight of judgment pressing down on her, and he understood how it felt to be an outsider in a community that was otherwise close-knit. He knew that small acts could change the course of a moment, and perhaps even a life. Their eyes met briefly across the square. In that single moment, Emily saw something she hadn't seen all night. Understanding. Not judgment, not pity, just understanding. And Daniel, sensing her discomfort, made a quiet decision. He would step forward. He would offer a hand, not as a performance, but as an act of kindness, a gesture of humanity. Emily, unaware of the choice he was about to make, took a deep breath and adjusted her dress, preparing herself for what she hoped would be a moment of peace, however brief. As the music shifted into a slower, softer tune, Emily felt a strange mixture of anticipation and anxiety. She wasn't sure what would happen next. The other girls continued to whisper and glance, but the weight of their attention felt different now. Something had shifted. She couldn't yet put her finger on it, but it was as if the world had subtly tilted, making space for something unexpected. Emily's heart beat faster, but this time it wasn't from fear alone. There was a flicker of hope, a small flame of possibility that tonight might yet hold a moment of connection, of dignity, of recognition. Emily's heart was still racing from the whispers, the laughter, and the sharp words that had made her feel small. She had stepped back toward the edge of the square, intending to leave, but then she noticed him, the Apache man standing quietly near the wooden post. There was something in his calm presence that drew her gaze. He didn't look at her with judgment, nor did he look away like so many others. He simply looked with an understanding that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt all night. For a moment she froze, unsure what to do. Daniel Whitehawk had noticed her hesitation. He could see her shoulders tense, the way she hugged herself as if to protect from the cold air or the invisible sting of humiliation. He remembered nights like this from his own childhood, nights where he had felt out of place, laughed at, or ignored by people who were supposed to be his peers. He knew that sometimes all it took was a simple gesture, an acknowledgement, a small act of courage to change the course of someone's evening. He stepped forward, slowly and deliberately, not wanting to startle her. His boots made soft thuds on the wooden floor beneath the string lights. He approached without haste, allowing her the space to retreat if she wanted. But Emily didn't move. She was still holding her cup of cider, fingers trembling slightly around the edges. She felt like a fragile bird caught between fear and hope, unsure if she could trust anyone tonight. Daniel stopped a few feet away and smiled gently. His smile wasn't wide or flashy. It was quiet, steady, and kind. "Would you like to dance?" he asked. His voice was calm, warm, and respectful. It wasn't loud, demanding, or patronizing. It was the kind of voice that made someone feel safe, like a friend who understood without needing to explain. Emily blinked, startled. She hadn't expected anyone to speak to her kindly tonight. The whispers and laughter had left her feeling invisible, unwanted, like a shadow passing through the square. And yet, here was someone, a stranger even, offering her a hand. Words seemed to fail her, and her heart beat faster, a mix of fear, surprise, and a strange flicker of hope. I don't really know how," she said softly, her voice trembling. She felt awkward and exposed. She had never been the kind of girl who danced confidently in front of crowds. Her city friends had often laughed at her timidity. Here in Red Mesa, she felt the weight of judgment pressing down even more. "That's all right," Daniel replied with a small, reassuring smile. "Neither do most people here. They're just moving and hoping for the best." There was no hint of mockery in his words, no hidden meaning. It was as if he truly believed in what he was saying. Emily felt a little warmth in her chest, a quiet comfort that she hadn't known she needed. For a moment she hesitated. The whispers of the girls who had humiliated her still lingered at the edges of her mind. The fear that she would be laughed at again made her step back slightly. But Daniel didn't rush her. He waited patiently, allowing her to gather courage in her own time. Then he extended his hand, not dramatically, not with flair, but simply, gently. It was an invitation, not a demand. Emily looked at it, unsure at first. Her fingers hovered above his for a long moment. The music continued to play, but she felt as if time had slowed around them. The other dancers swirled on the floor, lights flickering, laughter echoing, but it all seemed distant. Finally, Emily took his hand. The moment their fingers intertwined, something shifted inside her. It wasn't a sudden, magical transformation, but a quiet, gentle easing of the fear and tension that had gripped her since she arrived at the dance. She felt steadier, as if a small anchor had been placed in her chest. Daniel guided her slowly onto the dance floor. He didn't spin or twirl or perform complicated steps. He simply moved with a rhythm that was easy to follow, giving Emily time to find her own pace. He kept his hand firm but gentle, allowing her to feel the connection without pressure. Emily's breath began to even out, and the tight knot of embarrassment in her stomach loosened. For the first time that night, she felt like she belonged, even if only in that small space between his hand and hers. "You don't deserve to leave because someone else doesn't understand kindness," Daniel said quietly as they moved in simple steps. His words were soft, meant only for her ears, but they carried a weight that made Emily blink. She hadn't realized how deeply she had felt the sting of judgment tonight, until now. Hearing someone speak with such understanding, without any expectation or judgment, touched her in a way she hadn't expected. Emily tried to smile, but it came out shyly at first. Daniel didn't comment on it. He simply continued to move slowly with her, letting the music carry them forward. She began to notice the way the lights twinkled above, the way the wooden floor felt solid beneath her feet, and the gentle warmth of his hand holding hers. The laughter from the other girl still hovered at the edges of the square, but it felt distant, less important. Tonight, she realized, she didn't have to be defined by their words or their judgments. As the song continued, Emily's confidence grew in small steps. She began to sway more naturally, her movements less stiff and more in tune with the music. Daniel guided her with patience, never rushing, never forcing, but simply allowing her to feel the rhythm and the moment. She began to notice the small joys around her, the sound of the violin, the warmth of the lanterns, the smiles of families enjoying the evening. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, Emily felt a flicker of happiness. The other dancers on the floor gradually noticed her as well. Some of the younger girls paused mid-step, watching curiously. Some of the older women smiled quietly, as if acknowledging that something special was happening. Emily felt their eyes, but this time, she didn't feel fear. She felt a quiet sense of pride. She was standing here, moving and smiling, not because anyone demanded it, but because she had chosen to. Daniel didn't try to impress anyone. He didn't perform for the crowd or make a show of helping her. He simply continued to dance, keeping her steady, allowing her to find her own confidence. It was a lesson in humility and kindness, and Emily felt it deeply. She realized that sometimes the most powerful moments aren't loud or dramatic. Sometimes they are quiet, patient, and respectful. The song seemed to stretch on, giving Emily more time to breathe, to relax, and to enjoy the music. She even dared a small laugh when the violin hit a cheerful note. Daniel smiled in return, but he didn't say anything. Words weren't necessary. The connection between them, simple as it was, carried meaning enough. As the final notes of the song played, Emily felt a surge of gratitude. She had come to the dance expecting to feel alone, humiliated, and invisible. Instead, she had been met with kindness, patience, and understanding. The simple act of someone offering their hand had transformed her evening. She realized that moments like this could change a person, not with grand gestures or speeches, but with small, genuine acts of care. When the song ended, they stepped off the dance floor together. Emily's cheeks were flushed, not from embarrassment this time, but from excitement and relief. She looked around, noticing the faces of the crowd. Some were still curious, some impressed, and some simply observing. She no longer cared about the whispers or the judgment. They had lost their power over her. She had experienced something far stronger: acceptance and respect. Daniel gave her a polite nod, a silent acknowledgement of what they had shared. Emily smiled back, her heart lighter than it had been all night. She realized that this moment, simple as it seemed, would stay with her for a long time. It was proof that even in a world that sometimes seemed harsh and unkind, There were people who could offer support, patience, and dignity. As they moved away from the floor, Emily took one last glance around the square. The lights still flickered, the music continued softly, and the laughter of families and friends filled the air. But for Emily, the world had shifted. She no longer felt like an outsider. She had discovered the quiet power of a simple gesture, the strength in someone treating her with kindness when others had not. Walking back toward the edge of the square, she felt a newfound sense of courage. She knew that the whispers of judgment would not vanish entirely. They might linger in school, in hallways, and in passing conversations, but she also knew that their power had diminished. She had found something far more important: self-respect, and the knowledge that she could accept and give kindness, even in small moments. That night, Emily would remember more than the dance, more than the lights, or the music. She would remember the gentle hand that had reached for hers, the steady presence that had offered patience when the world felt impatient, and the quiet words that had reminded her she deserved respect. It was a memory that would stay with her, a lesson she would carry into her future, a reminder that even in moments of shame or embarrassment, kindness could light the way. After the song ended, Emily felt a mixture of relief and disbelief. Her heartbeat had finally slowed, and for the first time that night, she didn't feel small or humiliated. She still held Daniel's hand lightly, unsure whether to let go or keep it for a few more seconds. There was a strange quiet around them, almost as if the world had paused to acknowledge what had just happened. For Emily, the harvest dance had been terrifying, filled with whispers and laughter meant to make her feel invisible. Yet now, something completely different had taken its place, a feeling of being seen, being understood, and being treated with respect. The other dancers on the floor noticed them as well. Some paused mid-step, curious about the new presence that had appeared among them. The girls who had whispered about Emily earlier now looked unsure of what to do. Their laughter had faded into awkward silence. They had expected her to be embarrassed, to run away, to retreat into herself, and yet here she was, holding her head a little higher than before, walking with someone who treated her with patience and kindness. The power dynamic had quietly shifted, and they didn't quite know how to respond. Daniel didn't make any grand gestures. He didn't turn to the crowd or demand attention. He simply nodded politely to Emily, a small acknowledgement of the courage she had shown by staying on the dance floor despite her fears. "You did just fine," he said softly. Words meant only for her. They carried no judgment, no pressure, just encouragement. Emily felt a warmth spreading through her chest. It wasn't the kind of warmth that came from applause or praise. It was deeper, more personal, the kind that comes from knowing someone genuinely believes in you, even when others do not. They stepped off the floor together, moving toward the edge of the square where the lights were softer and the music quieter. Emily's dress swayed gently as she walked, and she felt the cool evening air brushing against her arms. She noticed the little things she hadn't paid attention to before: the smell of roasted corn from a nearby stall, the way the lanterns flickered in the light breeze, the soft rustle of leaves underfoot. For the first time all evening, she could breathe, could take in the surroundings without fear or anxiety pressing on her chest. A few of the townspeople approached from nearby tables and benches. They were older women who had noticed the dance from a distance, women who had seen the kindness Daniel had shown and recognized it for what it was. One of them smiled gently at Emily. "It's a nice thing what he did," she said quietly to another, nodding toward Daniel. "Not everyone takes the time to see someone like that." Emily felt her cheeks flush, not from embarrassment, but from a small, growing pride. Someone had noticed not just her presence, but the quiet courage it had taken to accept kindness in a moment of fear. The girls who had humiliated her earlier now avoided eye contact. Their whispers had faded completely, replaced by a strange mixture of confusion and curiosity. They had expected Emily to crumble, to leave with her head down, to disappear into the background. Instead, she had stood tall, walked with confidence, and accepted someone's hand without hesitation. The crowd didn't have to applaud to acknowledge that something important had happened. Even the simplest gestures can leave a lasting impression, and Emily had just experienced one that would linger in her memory forever. As they continued walking, Daniel spoke softly, breaking the silence. "You handled that very well," he said. His words weren't meant to flatter. They were simply honest. It's not easy to face a crowd like that, especially when you feel like you don't belong. You stayed, and you didn't let them define you. That takes strength. Emily felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from the realization that someone understood. No one had said anything like that to her all night. Not the girls at school, not the boys who laughed, not even her teachers. Yet here was Daniel speaking truth and kindness in the midst of everything that had tried to make her feel small. They found a quiet bench near the edge of the square. The lights above created a soft glow around them, and the distant sound of music still floated on the breeze. Emily sat down slowly, still holding Daniel's hand for a moment before gently letting go. She felt grounded, more aware of herself, and strangely proud. She had faced the whispers, the stares, and the humiliation, and she had survived, not just survived, but felt a sense of dignity restored. Daniel sat beside her, not crowding her, not intruding. He simply gave her space, ready to offer support if needed. For a few moments they just sat in silence, listening to the gentle murmur of the crowd, the soft laughter of children, and the faint hum of the band playing in the distance. There was a moment of peace, a pause in the chaos of judgment and fear. Emily realized that sometimes the quiet moments were the most powerful. They allowed her to absorb what had happened, to reflect on her feelings, and to recognize the courage she had shown. Emily's mind wandered back to the girls who had whispered and laughed at her. She thought about the sharp words, the smirks, and the feeling of being targeted, and yet now she saw it differently. She realized that their behavior was not a reflection of her worth but of their own insecurity and ignorance. That night, she understood something profound. Humiliation loses its power when someone refuses to accept it. When someone shows kindness, respect, and understanding, the cruelty of others fades in comparison. As the evening progressed, Emily began to notice more subtle changes in the crowd. Some of the younger girls who had watched curiously earlier now whispered to each other, pointing toward her with interest rather than ridicule. A few older townspeople nodded subtly in acknowledgement, as if to say, "We see you, you matter." The atmosphere around Emily shifted, not dramatically, but in small, meaningful ways. She felt less like an outsider and more like someone who belonged, even if only for this night. Daniel, noticing her gaze, spoke again. "Sometimes people forget how much courage it takes to simply be yourself in front of others," he said. "You showed that courage tonight, Emily. Remember it. Hold on to it. It will help you more than you realize." Emily nodded, absorbing his words. She felt a quiet determination growing inside her. She wouldn't let whispers or laughter define her. She wouldn't shrink away from new experiences out of fear. She had discovered an inner strength, sparked by a simple act of kindness from a stranger who had chosen to see her for who she was. The night wore on, and the crowd began to thin. Families started to leave, children yawning and holding hands with parents. The music slowed, and the square gradually quieted, leaving only the soft glow of lanterns and the distant chirping of crickets. Emily and Daniel remained on the bench for a while longer, savoring the quiet and reflecting on the evening. Emily felt a sense of gratitude that she had never felt before, not just for Daniel, but for the opportunity to experience a moment of genuine human connection in a world that sometimes felt unkind. As she watched the last dancers leave the floor, Emily realized that the harvest dance had been much more than a celebration of crops and tradition. It had been a celebration of courage, of empathy, and of the quiet strength that comes from being treated with dignity. She had learned a lesson that night that would stay with her for the rest of her life. Even in the face of cruelty or indifference, there are people who can offer kindness, and accepting that kindness does not make you weak, it makes you stronger. Emily finally stood, brushing her dress lightly and smoothing her hair. She felt lighter than she had all evening, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She turned to Daniel, who gave her a gentle nod, acknowledging her growth and courage without words. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice filled with genuine appreciation. Daniel smiled in return, not needing a response or recognition. The act itself, the shared understanding, was enough. Walking back toward the square's edge, Emily noticed the small gestures of kindness around her. An older couple holding hands, a mother helping her child with a lantern, friends laughing without malice. It was a reminder that even in a world with whispers and judgment, there was still warmth, connection, and the possibility of understanding. Emily felt a sense of belonging she hadn't expected to find that night. By the time she and Daniel parted ways, Emily's perspective had shifted entirely. The humiliation she had felt earlier still lingered as a memory, but it no longer had the power to control her emotions. She had faced it, and in doing so, discovered her own courage. She had experienced the transformative power of kindness, patience, and understanding. The hand that Daniel had offered her wasn't just a gesture of a dance. It was a symbol of humanity, respect, and quiet strength. As Emily and her mother walked home through the cool night, Emily reflected on the evening. The harvest dance had started as a night of fear, embarrassment, and doubt, but it had ended as a night of connection, courage, and self-discovery. She had learned that one person's kindness could outshine the cruelty of many. She had learned that standing tall, even in the face of humiliation, could be a victory in itself. And most importantly, she had learned that being seen and respected by someone who truly cares is one of the most powerful experiences a person can have. The days after the harvest dance felt different to Emily. She woke each morning with a quiet strength she hadn't known before. Even the small sounds of the town, the creak of wooden doors, the clatter of dishes, the low hum of conversation in the streets, seemed to carry a gentle rhythm she could follow. At school, the whispers and stares from the girls who had humiliated her began to fade. They didn't disappear entirely, but their sharpness had dulled. Emily noticed the subtle shift, though she couldn't put it into words at first. People looked at her differently, not with mockery, but with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Emily herself had changed. She moved through the hallways with a steadier gait, her shoulders held a little higher. She didn't speak loudly or try to command attention, but there was a quiet confidence in the way she carried herself. She realized that courage didn't mean never feeling afraid. Courage meant stepping forward anyway, even when fear and doubt tried to hold you back. And that night at the dance had shown her exactly how that felt. Her mother noticed a change immediately. One morning at breakfast, she looked at Emily and smiled, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. "You seem different," she said. "There's a lightness about you I haven't seen in a long time." Emily smiled shyly but nodded. I feel stronger," she admitted. "I think I understand something important now. Sometimes being brave isn't about standing out. It's about standing up for yourself, even quietly. Her mother reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "That's my girl," she said softly. "You've grown so much, and I'm proud of you." At school, Emily found that she was no longer invisible. She wasn't suddenly popular or surrounded by friends, but she was noticed. A few of the younger students who had watched the dance that night began to smile at her in the hallways. Some of the older students nodded politely or offered quiet greetings. Even the girls who had whispered about her at the dance avoided confrontation now. Emily felt neither vindication nor triumph. She felt relief and, more importantly, a sense of self-respect. She understood that people's opinions could not define her, and she no longer allowed them to dictate her sense of worth. Daniel Whitehawk's presence lingered in her mind as well. Though she didn't see him every day, she remembered the steady kindness in his eyes, the patience in his voice, and the gentle strength in his hand. His quiet encouragement had shown her that even a small act of kindness could change everything. Emily realized that it wasn't about who he was or what he had done. It was about what he had taught her without words. That dignity, respect, and patience have more power than cruelty or gossip ever could. One afternoon, a week after the dance, Emily and her mother passed Daniel near the edge of town. He was repairing a fence along a dirt road, hands steady as he worked. Emily's mother waved and Daniel nodded politely. "Good afternoon, Daniel," Emily said, her voice soft but confident. Daniel paused and smiled. "Hello, Emily," he replied. "I hope you're well." "I am," she said. "Thank you for the dance." He nodded, understanding the depth of her gratitude without needing more words. Emily felt a warm sense of closure in that moment. She realized that the harvest dance had not only changed her but had left a lasting impact on the community, even if quietly. As autumn slowly turned to winter, Emily continued to grow. The lessons from that night carried her through difficult moments, when she felt lonely, when schoolwork seemed overwhelming, or when she doubted herself. She remembered the courage it had taken to stay on the dance floor and the strength she had felt in accepting Daniel's hand. That memory became a quiet anchor, reminding her that she could face challenges with patience and resilience. The town of Red Mesa also seemed to shift, subtly but meaningfully. Though no one spoke openly about the harvest dance in the days that followed, the memory lingered. Some townspeople mentioned it later in passing, describing it as unexpected or a moment worth remembering. Families who had been at the square spoke of a quiet act of kindness that had caught their attention. Parents told their children, sometimes without realizing it, that courage and kindness are more powerful than mockery or fear. Emily realized that a single moment, shared in genuine care, could ripple out to touch the lives of many. Over the next few months, Emily began to engage more with her classmates. She joined a small art club at school, one that had always seemed welcoming but where she had previously hesitated to speak up. There, she met students who shared her interests, and she began to form quiet friendships. These were not loud, dramatic bonds, but steady connections that grew over time. She learned that belonging didn't have to mean being the center of attention. It meant finding spaces and people where she felt safe, respected, and encouraged to be herself. Emily also began to notice the subtle changes in the girls who had whispered about her at the dance. They didn't approach her with apologies, but their behavior shifted. Their laughter stopped when she walked by. Their sharp comments faded into silence. Some of them even made small gestures of inclusion, offering a chair at a table, nodding in the hall, or smiling briefly. Emily didn't take these gestures as personal victory or revenge. She took them as signs that people could learn and grow, just as she had learned to stand taller and move forward with grace. Daniel remained a quiet figure in the background of her life, a symbol of the night that had taught her so much. Emily sometimes thought about him while walking through the woods near Red Mesa, watching the snow begin to fall in delicate flakes. She imagined him tending the land, caring for the forests, and quietly making a difference in the town through small acts of responsibility and kindness. She realized that his influence had been subtle but profound, teaching her about patience, courage, and the power of a steady heart. Emily often reflected on the harvest dance, realizing that it had been about far more than music, lights, and celebration. It had been about human connection, about courage in the face of fear, and about dignity in the midst of judgment. She remembered the soft glow of the lanterns, the twinkle of the string lights above, and the gentle pressure of Daniel's hand guiding her through the dance. These memories became a source of strength, a quiet reassurance that even in a world with whispers, judgment, and cruelty, there were moments of profound kindness that could transform everything. One afternoon, Emily's mother asked her to help with decorations for a small winter festival in town. Emily agreed, smiling as she hung handmade snowflakes along the community hall. As she worked, she noticed the little ways people treated her differently now. The children greeted her with warmth, neighbors spoke with genuine interest, and even some of the older students nodded in quiet acknowledgement. She realized that the confidence she had gained from the dance had extended beyond that night, changing the way she moved through the world. She had discovered the strength of self-respect, the value of patience, and the quiet power of choosing courage over fear. Emily also began to help younger students at school who seemed shy or uncertain. She remembered how it felt to be on the edge of the dance floor, humiliated and unsure. Now, she could offer support, a smile, or a kind word to someone in need. She found herself quietly becoming a source of encouragement, much like Daniel had been for her. It wasn't something she announced or made a show of. It was a simple, natural act of kindness that felt rewarding in itself. She realized that true strength often comes in the form of helping others find courage, just as she had been helped. As winter deepened, Emily often found herself walking alone through the town square, recalling the harvest dance. The snow covered the ground in a soft white blanket, lanterns twinkled faintly, and the air was crisp and cold. She smiled softly to herself, remembering how she had felt that night, the fear, the embarrassment, the quiet hope, and finally, the warmth of kindness that had changed everything. It was a memory that reminded her of her own resilience and of the extraordinary power of simple, genuine gestures. By the time spring arrived, Emily had become more confident in her place in Red Mesa. She had friends who cared for her, experiences that strengthened her, and a newfound sense of self-worth. She understood that life would continue to present challenges, moments of fear, and instances of judgment, but she also knew that she had the strength to face them. Guided by the lessons she had learned at the harvest dance, the night had taught her that courage, patience, and dignity could overcome ridicule and fear, and that kindness, even from a stranger, could change the course of a life. Years later, when Emily thought back on her first autumn in Red Mesa, she didn't remember the humiliation in sharp detail. She remembered the hand that reached for hers, the steady gaze of someone who truly saw her, and the feeling of being understood when the world seemed unkind. She realized that the harvest dance had been a turning point, a quiet moment of transformation that would shape her character and her understanding of human connection forever. The town itself had changed subtly as well. People who had witnessed the moment of kindness carried it with them in their own lives. Some spoke of it to their children, teaching them that courage and empathy matter more than gossip or judgment. Others reflected silently on the value of treating others with respect, understanding that small acts of kindness can ripple out to touch many lives. The harvest dance had been a celebration of crops and tradition, but it had become something more profound, a lesson in humanity, patience, and the quiet strength that comes from seeing and acknowledging the worth of another person. Emily had grown in ways that she didn't fully recognize at the time. She learned to navigate the world with confidence, empathy, and quiet courage. She learned that her worth wasn't defined by whispers or laughter, but by her own sense of self-respect and by the way she treated others. She learned that moments of kindness, patience, and understanding, even from strangers, can leave an enduring mark. And in the quiet corners of Red Mesa, beneath the glow of string lights and the soft rustle of autumn leaves, one gentle act had changed everything. It had transformed a night of fear into a lifetime lesson, a moment of humiliation into a memory of courage, and a town's tradition into a story of human connection that would never be forgotten.